What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, June 6th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. Don't know how many games tonight. Didn't actually look. There's a lot of them, though. Might be like 12 or something. Yeah, it looks like 12. We'll call it 12. Plenty of games tonight, so a lot of stuff. Steven just mentioned it in chat. 12 games, 24 opportunities to get kicked in the nuts. So, 12 games tonight. Looks like we have a little bit of weather concerns. Definitely some stuff to pay attention to throughout the day. Right now, Arizona and Cincinnati looks like the most concerning spot. So definitely will want to pay attention to that one, especially since we have a high total in that game as well. Great hitters park. So ideally, we can get to some bats in that one. So we'll definitely want to pay attention to that. But I'm going to go through game by game using the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. If you do want to use these in your DFS play, the link is in the description below. Take advantage of that. Use promo code UTAMLB to get 10% off as well. Also, if you are a lower volume player, don't want to pay to sign up for the full projections package that gets you the fully detailed projections, downloadable, all of that. You can sign up for the overlay package that is $10 a month, just overlays our projections onto your DraftKings lineups page. So while you're building by hand, you still have those projections right in front of you. You can use those for that, use them to late swap, really useful for that. And those are included in the full projections package as well. So getting into it, starting with the Red Sox and the Yankees. I didn't build lineups, but I did get optimal rates for everybody. Feels like earlier in the day, building lineups probably isn't as useful as just having optimal rates, being able to talk through what looks overowned and underowned, because it's more so going to just have me talking about teams that I'm getting to that I may or may not be getting to in 5 or 6 hours. So figured the optimal percentages end up being a little bit more useful. And starting here with the Red Sox and Yankees, Will Warren going for the Yankees, Walker Buehler on the mound for the Red Sox. Some interest here in Will Warren, solid strikeout matchup for him. The Red Sox obviously do have some good hitters in their lineup. You have Devers, you have Duran. It is a relatively dangerous lineup, and then you're in Yankee Stadium, so it's certainly not safe. But the Red Sox active roster ranks 20th overall in WRC plus against right-handed pitching this year. They are also third in strikeout percentage, so plenty of upside here for Warren, who is a pretty solid arm for the Yankees. Comes into this game with a 29.7% strikeout percentage in 52 innings pitched this year. Basically league average in location, slightly above average in pitching plus, slightly above average in stuff plus. But again, the strikeouts have really been there, and this is a good strikeout matchup for him. If we take a look at his splits overall this season, left-handed hitters striking out 26% of the time, righties striking out 35.5% of the time, probably will have more left-handed bats than right-handed bats in this lineup, but it'll probably be pretty balanced. Projected lineup that I'm looking at right now has 5 lefties, 4 righties. The righties toward the bottom of the order, though, so you probably will get more plate appearances against lefties. Still good strikeout numbers, though, in that split, just not as dominant as against righties. And then similarly, 347 expected WOBA, 162 expected ISO to lefties. Those numbers are fine. They're not great, but they're fine. Righties, he's been very, very good. 275 expected WOBA, 121 expected ISO. So basically, I think it's a solid spot for Warren. 17% projected ownership, about a 15% chance of being optimal at $8,000. One thing that you will want to keep an eye on, though, is if you do happen to, for some reason, get a right-handed heavy Boston lineup, or even if it's not right-handed heavy overall, if for some reason they move right-handed bats higher in the order, that is a very big bump for Will Warren potentially, but I don't know why Boston would do that. I assume that they won't. On the other side, Walker Buehler, $7,600 price tag, not getting any ownership, about a 6% chance of being optimal. So pretty easy to ignore Buehler for the most part here. If he gets into a couple lineups out of 150, it's fine. But obviously not an easy matchup for him going up against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. He's not super cheap or anything at 7,600. He's not the same pitcher that he was back with the Dodgers prior to injuries and all of that. Striking out 22.5% of righties this year, 20% of lefties, 208 expected ISO to righties, 145 to lefties. Don't really have a strong case for getting to Buehler here, but I do think Warren looks pretty solid. Offensively, starting on the Red Sox side, we have not a ton of ownership coming in here, sub 5% across the board. In terms of optimal rates, it's exactly what you would expect at the top. Jarren Duran, Rafael Devers, Willie Abreu, all 5 to 8% to be optimal. And then it drops off to Story and Meyer around 5%, Toro around 4%. So in the aggregate, I do think the Red Sox are probably going a little bit underowned optimal percentage versus ownership. You do also get some negative correlation against Warren. Very high upside ballpark in Yankee Stadium, but still a low probability team overall. And if you are going to them, their best hitters do have the most favorable matchup. Like I said, Warren's fine against lefties, but certainly gives up more production to left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters. And it just so happens that all of the best hitters on the Red Sox are left-handed. So you do have that working in their favor if you wanted to get some bats against a semi-popular Warren, maybe just, 2 or 3 man some of the lefties. Also looking at the Yankees bullpen, a slight positive for Duran, Devers, and Abreu as well. The Yankees have 2 left-handed relievers in their bullpen, but one of them, Tim Hill, pitched both yesterday and the day before. So it's not impossible that he's available today, but usually teams don't like to use a guy 3 days in a row. So most likely they will only have one left-handed reliever available to use against Duran, Devers, Abreu. The downside is that because of the way the Red Sox lineup is likely to look, you kind of only need one left-handed reliever against them because they're most likely just going to have Duran, Devers, Abreu back to back to back. So you can just bring the lefty in. It's not like if they had good right-handed bats. Back in the day, you had like JD Martinez. You throw him in there in between like Duran and Devers or Devers and Abreu, and then suddenly, the Yankees have to decide if they're going to have their left-handed reliever face JD Martinez or not. You don't have that luxury with this Red Sox team, so it is likely that at some point in the game, you just get a left-handed reliever coming in and facing all 3 of them for an at-bat. But it does still help that the Yankees probably only have one lefty reliever. On the other side, certainly a better matchup here for the Yankees bats than for the Red Sox bats. Implied run total north of 5 for New York. Like I said, strikeout percentage for Buehler is better against righties than lefties this year by a couple points, but he has given up more power to righties. Maybe we see that change. Maybe we don't. He has thrown a knuckle curve 20% of the time to left-handed hitters. He's also thrown his cutter 20% of the time, changeup 15% of the time. So you basically have a 55% usage rate on pitches that generally do play better against opposite-handed hitters. So wouldn't be surprised if you do continue to see a little bit more power allowed to right-handed bats. Aaron Judge, even without considering matchup, is clearly going to be a great play all of the time. Getting 9% ownership here at 6,600. You do have a game in Coors Field. You have a game in Coors Field West in Sacramento. You maybe have a game in Cincinnati. So that combined with it being a 12-game slate does just pull Aaron Judge's overall ownership down a bit. 12 games, tons and tons of outfielders to get to, plenty of other bats to prioritize. So it does keep the ownership in check. And usually on these 12-game slates, you can kind of just play what you want for the most part. Ownership doesn't end up being a problem. About a 6% chance of being optimal for Judge at 6,600, 5.5% for Bellinger, 5% for Grisham, 5% for Chisholm. Across the board, the Yankees just look like a secondary team, not getting much ownership. Nobody besides Judge is projected for more than 5% ownership. So you're going to see a lot of teams like this on a 12-game slate where they just kind of are teams that are going to get 5 to 10% ownership across the board. And like I was saying a second ago, you don't generally have to worry about the ownership that much, but certainly a high upside spot here for the Yankees. Even though Buehler hasn't been horrible this year, the park is conducive to hitting home runs, obviously. And you also have Aaron Judge. Houston taking on the Guardians in Cleveland. Colton Gordon for the Astros. Logan Allen is on the mound for the Guardians. Gordon is getting 8% ownership at 6,500. We actually right now have about a 14% chance of Gordon being optimal. I know at first glance, it looks like we have him projected a little bit higher than other places I've seen in the industry. We have him projected for 15 fantasy points. So pretty good point per dollar projection on him. The matchup is not great against Cleveland, but it's not terrible either. So far, he has made 4 starts in the majors. He's gone 19 and 2/3 innings, 23% strikeout percentage, projects to be about a 21% strikeout guy going forward, between a 4 and a 4.5 FIP. So he looks like a solid, a decent starter, kind of just an average-ish guy. Nothing great, but certainly not bad either in the way that he's projected going forward. And so at 6,500, I really don't mind him in this spot. Cleveland's active roster going back to the start of last season does have the 5th best WRC plus against left-handed pitching. They rank 16th in strikeout percentage. I mentioned it yesterday or the other day with Cleveland, though. One thing to keep in mind, it's not a great strikeout matchup overall. when you have, you have to face Steven Kwan, you have to face Jose Ramirez. They're both difficult strikeout matchups, but it is interesting when you get a team like that and they end up in the aggregate being in the middle of the pack in strikeout percentage, because that is telling you that there are plenty of bats that will strike out in that lineup. Whereas, you get a team like the Padres, or even a team like the A's, where they have some low probability guys too, but their average strikeout percentage is actually, it's very low. It's towards the bottom of the league because they don't have those other pieces to make up for it. So that is something that you want to keep in mind is, like, obviously you're only facing each hitter one time through the order. So you can have two teams that have an identical average strikeout percentage, but it's going to be a better strikeout matchup for the pitcher if the average is like, if the average has like two guys that don't strike out and then seven guys that strike out at an above average rate, and it comes out to an average strikeout rate, as opposed to a team where everybody just strikes out the average, because you can, not strike out those two hitters, but then make up the strikeouts on seven other guys, as opposed to having 7 or 9, difficult strikeout matchups. So that is something to keep in mind with Cleveland. You're seeing that average strikeout percentage, despite having a couple of guys at the top that really don't K. So overall, I think Gordon looks like a pretty decent value option here. Logan Allen on the other side, not much interest there at 6K. 3% projected ownership, 3% chance of being optimal. Nothing that really looks overly appealing. For the bats, starting with the Astros, about a 4.5 team total here. Keep in mind, good home run park, particularly for lefties in Cleveland. That does not help. The left-handed part does not help the Astros because they don't have those. But Logan Allen, limited sample so far this season, only 189 pitches thrown to lefties, 718 to righties, 17.8% K percentage to righties, has allowed a 197 expected ISO compared to only a 120 actual ISO, 343 expected WOBA. If you go back to last season, 17.5% K percentage, 227 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. And that's all that you have in this Houston lineup, basically, is right-handed bats. 165 expected ISO against lefties since last year for Pena. 145 for Paredes is lower than you would like. Altuve 147, Christian Walker 132, Diaz leading the way at 208. So not the best right-handed power bats for the Astros, but they are pretty inexpensive. So right now, I think actually going a little bit under-owned. You pretty much have 5% ownership across the board to the main pieces on the Astros, and then it drops off from there. But in terms of optimal percentage, 12.5% for Pena at 4,400, probably leading off. 11% for Altuve, 4,200, second base outfield eligible. 10% to Diaz, 10% to Walker, 9% to Paredes, and then goes down from there to Dubon, Myers, and Smith. But it does look like when you factor in their salary, they're just not getting quite as much ownership as they probably should. Decent spot for them, even though they're not the best power bats, but the rest of your lineup around them will kind of, you'll be able to do what you want. You can get to good secondary stacks. You can get to good pitching. So I do like the value component that comes with the Astros here. And the other thing is that while they don't have the best power numbers against lefties, going back to last year, it's not like this is a team of guys that, are just slap hitters. Like, Pena can hit home runs and steal bases. We know Altuve can hit home runs. Christian Walker is not having the year that the Astros would probably like, but we know this is a guy that does have legitimate power. We know Yainer Diaz has legitimate power, even though it hasn't been there a ton this year. Paredes still can, pull 330-foot fly balls for homers. Would certainly like him a lot more if this game were in Houston, but it's not like you're just talking about a team where if they do hit a few home runs, you're genuinely surprised or anything like that. It's not a true power hitting team, but it is a team that does have guys throughout the lineup that can still do some damage. So that's nice to see as well. On the other side for Cleveland, only guy getting any ownership here is Jose Ramirez at about 4%, showing up as optimal about 5%. So pretty much in line with the field on that one. And then sub 3% optimal rates on every other bat. So they don't really look like the field's going to get to them. They don't really look good in our projections outside of, obviously if you get to some Jose Ramirez, it goes without saying that is perfectly fine. Pretty high home run projection on him. Pretty high stolen base projection on him. So, you get the stolen base and power upside from Ramirez, but he is also 5,700. He certainly doesn't stand out as a priority in terms of, pay up hitters on this slate. I'd rather get to Judge if I can, even though the outfield is more loaded. And then obviously there's going to be plenty of other good, expensive bats throughout the slate. But Ramirez, the guy, if you do get to Cleveland here. Cubs are taking on the Tigers in Detroit. Tarik Skubal taking on the Cubs offense. So interested to see which one wins out there, because it seems like the Cubs win every single slate that they're on, and Tarek Skubal wins every single slate that he's on. My bet here would be on Skubal. He is the highest projected pitcher on the slate at $11,500. He is getting 38% ownership. I do think he's going a bit over-owned here, but he still has an optimal rate of about 22% at $11,500. If you're $11,500 and you're showing up in optimal lineups between 20 and 25% of the time, that really speaks to just how good of a play you are, even if the ownership is a little bit higher than it would be on an optimal, a perfect basis. You're not trying to make perfect lineups in MLB. You do have plenty of value options that you can fit in with Skubal. So Skubal still, just looks like a really strong play, as he always does. Unbelievably good pitcher. 34.7% strikeout percentage in 75 and 2/3 innings pitched this year. Stuff plus grade is at about 119, which is up 6.5 points from last year. Strikeout percentage up 4.5 points from last year. Average fastball velo up about a mile per hour. Pitching plus was already very, very good at 112 last season. It's up 15 points this year to 127. Location plus was at 100 last year. It's up to 110 this year. So you're seeing, keep in mind the baseline for Skubal was already very, very good Cy Young Award winning pitcher. And then this year you've seen an improvement in his stuff, an improvement in his velocity, which goes hand in hand with his stuff, an improvement in his command, just unbelievably good pitcher. And if you can get to him, great. Ben Brown on the other side getting ownership as well at 22%. Good pitcher's park here. Again, not an easy matchup against the Tigers. This is one of the better teams in baseball against right-handed pitching this year. They do rank 8th in strikeout percentage, so there is some strikeout upside. They also rank 8th in WRC+, but Brown is only $7,000, so you are getting a salary discount here, which is nice. 15% chance of being optimal at 22% ownership. So far this season, for Brown, a 26% strikeout percentage, stuff plus grade, pitching plus grade, location plus grade, all below average, but not by a really wide margin. They're all in that 95 to 100 range. So for a $7,000 price tag on a slate where you have plenty of bats to pay for, where you have pitching that you want to pay for, Ben Brown looks like a pretty solid value. Would not expect to be getting to too much offense in this game. No ownership coming into the Cubs. Highest optimal rates are on Seiya Suzuki and Kyle Tucker at 3%. For the Tigers, a little bit higher run total. Obviously a better matchup against Brown, but no real ownership or anything coming into them either. Highest optimal rates here, 3% for Kerry Carpenter, 3% for Parker Meadows. Brown has held righties to a 144 expected ISO with a 27% K percentage since last season. Lefties do have a 201 expected ISO against him, but they have also struck out 30% of the time. This season alone, the expected ISO is up to 256 for lefties, but a 31.6% K percentage. And keep in mind, this is in Comerica Park as well. So, it's kind of, with both of these teams, if you're playing a bunch of lineups and you see some Kyle Tucker, some Suzuki, some Carpenter, some Meadows, obviously it's fine. You don't need to X those lineups out or anything, but I wouldn't expect to be getting to either offense outside of just, a little bit of random exposure. If I had to choose one, I would go to the Tigers. Obviously, Ben Brown, solid, but nowhere near the same planet that Tarek Skubal pitches on. Arizona taking on Cincinnati in Cincinnati, maybe. As I said at the top of the show, we do have weather concerns in this one. Looks like the game with the most weather concerns, at least right now. So definitely keep an eye on that. But for the sake of this show, because it is still 5 hours until lock, going to just assume that this one goes. And we have Nick Lodolo on the mound for Cincinnati at $8,100. Eduardo Rodriguez is pitching for the D-backs at $7,200. So we have two pitchers that are not bad in terms of talent, but neither one is going to look particularly good on this slate in Cincinnati as the weather starts to heat up. Very, very good park for offense. Rodriguez, so far this season, striking out 24.5% of hitters in 44 and 2/3 innings pitched. I haven't said his name in a while, so I want to say he's coming back off the injured list, maybe, or he's just not been on a slate in a while. Hasn't pitched since May 14th. He was on the 15-day IL with a shoulder injury, so remains to be seen exactly how deep into this game he goes. Has struck out 24.5% of hitters, like I said, so far this season. Hasn't been great overall by any stretch. 7.05 ERA. Obviously 44 innings, you're not reading that much into ERA, but 91.9 stuff plus grade, about a league average location plus grade. If you're going to have below average stuff, it does help to be able to command the ball really well and, better than average, which he doesn't. So not the worst matchup against Cincinnati, but a bad park, not somebody I really need to get to on a 12-game slate. Lodolo on the other side, only striking out 20.7% of hitters this year. That's down 4 points from last year. His stuff plus grade is still solid at 100.5, but that is also down 4 points from last year. So, fastball velo is down about a half a mile an hour as well. So Lodolo is somebody that, has shown good raw stuff in the past, arm talent, ability to get strikeouts. It hasn't really been there this season. And now you're getting a very difficult matchup against Arizona. They rank their active roster since last season against left-handed pitching, ranks 29th in strikeout percentage. They rank 9th in WRC+. They've been a very good offense overall this season. And you're not getting a salary discount on Lodolo either. 6% chance of being optimal. Not expecting to look to this game too much for pitching, even without considering that you also have rain concerns. Offensively, looks like a pretty solid game to target. Pretty much 5% ownership across the board to all of the best hitters on Arizona, with the exception of about 10% coming in to Ketel Marte at second base. Marte has about an 11 to 12% chance of being optimal. Does look like the best play from the Diamondbacks. Switch hitter, obviously has the platoon advantage in all of his matchups. 163 expected ISO allowed to righties since the start of last season for Lodolo. 192, though, so far this year, with only a 21% strikeout percentage. Marte has a 280 expected ISO against righties since the start of last season to go along with a 425 expected WOBA. Only a 15% strikeout percentage. Really like Ketel Marte here. You can see the very high home run projection for him. Also, a little bit of stolen base upside. That's certainly not what you're expecting from him, though. But a lot of power here. 0.23 double projection, 0.3 home run projection. Looks really good. Corbin Carroll, lefty, still a 9% chance of being optimal at 5,700, getting about 6% ownership. Eugenio Suarez, 7% chance of being optimal. Very high home run projection for him as well. He's been hitting the ball very, very well this year. 4,500 price tag is cheap for what you expect out of him. Since last season, a 218 expected ISO against lefties in 257 plate appearances. Lourdes Gurriel has a 204 expected ISO against lefties over that time, coming in at 3,800 with a 6% chance of being optimal. Gabby Moreno as a cheap catching option, 6% to be optimal. You have pinch hit risk on Randall Grichuk, but he is only 3K flat, about a 5% chance of being optimal at 6% owned. Pretty solid spot here for the Diamondbacks. On the other side, Reds are lower owned, 6% ownership coming into Tyler Stevenson, 5% coming into Spencer Steer. Other than that, about 4% or less on everyone in this lineup. And they do look a little bit worse than Arizona. Certainly not the same level of bats on this team that you have on Arizona. Not the same quality of offense, but still a great park. You still have Ellie De La Cruz, who gives you some home run upside in addition to plenty of stolen base upside. He will be hitting from the weaker side of the plate, but still gives you upside. That being said, not really. He wasn't in the projection set that I used. You can see we have him projected in right now. But either way, not getting much ownership there. He has been on the bereavement list. Not sure if he will be back. Seems likely he misses the series. So yeah, De La Cruz probably not playing, which weakens this lineup as well. Obviously, you can see that he is in our projections right now. That obviously changes when the lineup comes out. It just means that our data provider has him in the projected lineup. But clearly that weakens the lineup. And overall, I think the takeaway here for Cincinnati is that they're still playing in Great American Ballpark. That's obviously very good. You have a lot of volatility here when you have Eduardo Rodriguez coming back from the injured list. Like, he might just pitch horribly. That is obviously a possibility and has been something he's kind of done in general this year anyway. Overall this season, Rodriguez has been a little bit unlucky. He hasn't been good, but 241 actual ISO allowed to righties compared to a 181 expected ISO. So that expected ISO number, it's still a lot of power, but it's 60 points better than actual. Same with the expected WOBA, 391 actual versus 344 expected. That's still giving up production. It's just not giving up as much. So I think basically the way I view this is the Diamondbacks are a team that I want to get to. And then the Reds are a team that if they show up, fine, because it's a really good ballpark. Binking said, can you give us a winner from each game? I don't know what that means. Kansas City taking on the White Sox in Chicago. Seth Lugo, Davis Martin pitching in this one. 12% ownership coming into an $8,800 Seth Lugo. Davis Martin, $6,600, not getting any ownership. The matchup is certainly a lot better for Seth Lugo. Also, keep in mind, this is a park upgrade as well. Kansas City is one of the most difficult parks for getting strikeouts in baseball. So that is an upgrade for Lugo. Not a great strikeout pitcher anyway, but certainly makes him look a little bit better. Still a relatively low fantasy point projection on him at 8,800. The matchup is great, though. 6% chance of being optimal. So I think he's going a little bit overowned, but obviously playable against the White Sox in Chicago. Davis Martin, not somebody I'm really looking to get to against Kansas City. The Royals active roster, 96th in WRC plus is nice. They did obviously call up Jack Caglione, which should make the offense better, but they're 29th in K percentage against right-handed pitching. Martin is not a great strikeout pitcher on his own, has only struck out 13.6% of hitters so far this season. So no real interest in getting to Davis Martin. Binking said, which team wins the game? I mean, I don't have a take on it, so I don't want to just like talk out of my ass and pick teams to win. Like, chances are whoever I pick would just be whoever's favored. And I certainly don't have off the top of my head, like how often teams win and how that compares to lines. So I don't think I can really add anything there of value. Offensively, definitely more interested in the Kansas City side because they aren't the White Sox. Bobby Witt Jr., 16% projected ownership, 19 to 20% chance of being optimal, 5,500. Pretty cheap price tag for Bobby Witt's skill set. Tons of stolen base upside, tons of home run upside. Again, Davis Martin doesn't get a lot of strikeouts either, so you should have Bobby Witt putting the ball in play. Bobby Witt, somebody that generally is going to run well on batting average on balls in play because of his speed. 215 expected ISO to right-handed hitters allowed by Martin so far this season. So really like Bobby Witt here. Like Salvador Perez at 3,100. Have been saying it all year long that his expected numbers are not nearly as good as, or are a lot better than his actual. When you're talking about somebody that is extremely slow, that doesn't always mean that he's going to completely even out, but the truth is probably somewhere in between his 137 actual ISO and his 211 expected ISO against right-handed pitching this year. He has like a 70 or 80 point gap in expected WOBA versus actual. So when you get somebody like this, you can obviously argue about what the actual truth is in, what to expect from Salvador Perez at this point, but you look at the salary, which is a function of what Salvador Perez has actually done. And I think you can pretty confidently look at the expected numbers and at the very least say Salvador Perez probably deserves to be producing at a higher rate than he has so far, which means that he is probably underpriced, especially with catcher eligibility. So 10% ownership there, 15% chance of being optimal. Vinny Pasquantino is cheap at 3,300, 11% optimal rate, 9% ownership. Maikel Garcia getting about 6 to 7% ownership with a 10% chance of being optimal. Jonathan India, 9%. Caglione, 9%. 3,600 first base outfield. I like that for the power upside that he offers. Kansas City just across the board, high optimal percentages. They look underowned. I like them a lot. And it's really a function of two things. One, it's just the matchup is fine. The White Sox bullpen isn't any good. You have high upside plays in Witt, but then you also have, and Caglione potentially, but you also have really cheap pricing because this is a team that has underperformed this year relative to their actual talent level. Just talked about Salvador Perez, but we know Vinny Pasquantino has power. We know Maikel Garcia has some power and stolen base upside. We know Caglione has power. Waters and Massey can run a little bit and they have a little bit of power. Like it's kind of like the Astros where it's not a team of true home run hitters or anything like that, but it is a team that has some speed and it has guys that are capable of hitting home runs, even if it's not really their MO. And across the board, they're just really cheap. So if you stack them, you get this team that has an implied run total near 5, has power and speed in their lineup, and then the rest of their lineup is just the rest of your lineup, rather, is just good pitching, good hitting, whatever you want to get to. Also working for Kansas City and something that probably is driving up their optimal rates as a whole is the positions they play. Salvador Perez takes up a catcher spot. Bobby Witt Jr. takes up a shortstop spot on a slate where you're probably not going to have De La Cruz. Vinny Pasquantino, first base, you do have opportunity costs there, but he's still not an outfielder. Maikel Garcia, third base. Jonathan India, second base. You can stack really like the best plays from Kansas City without even dipping into the outfield. And the outfield is where you have the best one-offs generally, like just the best overall hitters. For the most part, you're grabbing Soto, you're grabbing Judge, you're grabbing just so many good outfield bats. So that makes Kansas City stacks better indirectly as well. And that's another reason probably that they are getting driven up a little bit and look like they're going a little bit under-owned. It's not just a matter of, how good is Bobby Witt? How good is Salvador Perez? How do they project? It's when you put them all together, how good does your lineup look around them? And you can just build extremely high upside lineups with Kansas City. I'm going to take a look real quick at what some of the 5-man Kansas City lineups that showed up as optimal look like, just because it'll probably reinforce what I was just saying. They are the most used, most optimal 5-man stack in the lineups that I had before the show. And if you go through these 5-mans, you see Tarek, you can afford Tarek Skubal. You get Brenton Doyle, whatever, in the outfield. It's a Coors bat in the outfield. Rafael Devers obviously looks good. Tarek Skubal again. Let's make this a little easier. Tarek Skubal again. Aaron Judge in the outfield. Sonny Gray. Ronald. Damn, it's scrolling way too fast. Saw one with Ronald Acuna. Here you have Skubal, Schwellenbach with Manny Machado. Gordon Gray, and then you're getting to Acuna and Austin Riley. Schwellenbach with Riley and Acuna again. Tatis, Merrill, Machado. Like you just get such high upside combinations around Kansas City, and that's what's going to drive them up a bit. Getting back to the other side of this one, where I would assume that the White Sox are going to look a lot less appealing, but the matchup against Lugo, not great. Again, not a great strikeout pitcher, not somebody that I usually get a ton of in DFS for that reason, but he's not a bad pitcher overall. The White Sox are certainly a bad offense. I think the White Sox are going a little bit under-owned, in particular Benintendi, Tauchman, and Vargas, but they're still not priorities. 7% chance of being optimal for Benintendi at 2,900. I've said it a lot recently, but he is actually making quality contact and hitting for some power this year, at least expected power. So he's really cheap. He can fit into some lineups as a value play if you need it. Vargas has a 207 expected ISO against righties this year. Benintendi's at 264. Actual ISO only 142. Tauchman 114 actual ISO 191, 114 expected ISO 191 actual. But those guys, if you get to them a little bit, fine. Luis Robert, in theory, has upside, but he still steals bases. He can't hit for shit though. But overall, it's the White Sox on a 12-game slate. I don't think you need to be that interested in them. If we look at the splits here for Seth Lugo, 17% K percentage against lefties this year, has allowed a 245 expected ISO. That is noteworthy because he is somebody that in the past had actually been really good at limiting power to lefties. He's got a very high spin rate curveball. He throws it a lot to lefties. It plays well against them. This year, he hasn't really had success against lefties, though, with that 245 expected ISO, 389 expected WOBA, also a 184 expected ISO to righties. So he has given up some power in addition to not getting strikeouts. But again, it's the White Sox. They suck. You don't need me to tell you that. Wookie said, I think Sonny Gray is an interesting pivot tonight over Tarek or Spencer. I haven't gotten there, but yeah, I'm with you. One of the first things I noticed when I looked at optimal rates was that I think Sonny Gray's optimal rate was like 2x his ownership, whereas, and again, this is not to detract from Skubal or suggest he's a bad play. Skubal's going a bit over-owned. Gray, lower optimal percentage for sure than Skubal, but even bigger gap in ownership than optimal rate. Getting to Toronto, taking on the Twins now. Schultz is opening for the Blue Jays. My guess here is he's going through the order once. That's what we saw when he opened last time. So this is going to come down. The total batters face projection when I ran everything was higher. It already pointed it out. It'll change. But Schultz is on 2 days rest. We saw him open against Texas, Tampa Bay. I don't know, one of those teams. He went 9 batters. He went 2 2/3. I'm expecting something in that range here. He is 4K. I don't think we need to play him in DFS. Bailey Ober on the other side, getting 8% ownership at 7,700, 8% chance of being optimal. strikeout matchup here blows against Toronto. Lowest strikeout percentage in baseball against right-handed pitching this season, edging out Kansas City by 0.1%. 106 WRC plus is not great. Middle of the pack, they rank 17th, but obviously a talented lineup. Most importantly, though, they just don't strike out. And so that's the problem that you run into with Bailey Ober. That being said, he is only 7,700. So he's, a mid-range low-owned arm if you need it. His strikeout percentage also has fallen off of a cliff this year. 27% last season, down to 18.5% this year in 62 innings pitched. The weird thing is nothing really shows up as like a huge red flag outside of that. His stuff plus grade is 96.3, which is about the same as last year. His fastball velo is down a mile per hour, but he was never a hard thrower anyway. Pitching plus grade 101.8. It's down a couple points from last year, but it's still good. 104.8 location plus grade, down a couple points from last year, but still above average. There's no clear drop off in any of those metrics for Bailey Ober, but the strikeout percentage has fallen off of a cliff, and you're talking about 62 innings pitched. So I'm certainly not looking at the underlying numbers and saying, oh, well, he's just going to rebound and start racking up Ks. Like, there is almost definitely a reason that the strikeouts are down. It just doesn't show up in any of the metrics that I mentioned. And then you're getting the really tough strikeout matchup here against the Blue Jays as well. Offensively, wouldn't expect to love much in this game. Blue Jays not really looking interesting at all. Like 3% ownership across the board, even lower optimal rates than that. On the Minnesota side, you get the pretty, unappealing quasi bullpen game where you get to face Schultz his first time through the order. And then, I had the Kansas City stacks still selected. So messed up on the optimal rates, and now the screen froze. But either way, you have the, quasi bullpen game where you're getting Schultz opening, and then I assume Eric Lauer probably going to follow. That's what they did against Texas. He went 3 1/3. Then he went 4 innings on the third. So maybe he goes today. It looks like that's what is expected. So not a super appealing matchup. Sub 5% ownership to Minnesota. Buxton leading the way, 4%. 2% chance of being optimal, 2% for Ryan Jeffers. Not much interest in the bats here. Getting back to the Toronto side for a second. They are showing up a little bit better than they were when I only had Kansas City stacks selected by accident. Addison Barger, 6% chance of being optimal. Bo Bichette, 5%. Vlad Guerrero, 5%. If you get to any of those guys, clearly they're fine, but neither offense is a priority in this one. San Diego going into Milwaukee to face the Brewers. For the Padres, it is Randy Vasquez. For the Brewers, it is Chad Patrick. Very, very difficult strikeout matchup for Chad Patrick. Very, very, very bad ability to pitch for Randy Vasquez. So not going to be very interested in either of these guys. 8,300 for Patrick, 5,800 for Vasquez. No ownership to Vasquez with a 2% chance of being optimal. 3% ownership to Patrick with a 3% chance of being optimal. I'm not expecting to get much of either one. San Diego against right-handed pitching this year, 110 WRC plus, ranks 11th. The strikeout percentage comes in at 27th. And it's just a team that has low Ks throughout their lineup. Vasquez, so far this season, striking out 13.6% of hitters. That is the same as Davis Martin in 58 2/3 innings pitched. Don't think we need to go there. There is one pitcher on the slate with a lower strikeout percentage, but Antonio Senzatella barely even counts as a pitcher. Looking at the bats in this one, it's a pretty good spot, I think, for either team, particularly Milwaukee in Milwaukee. But you probably will see relatively low ownership just because they're not the Mets facing Senzatella in Coors Field. They are not in Sacramento. So it is a team that I think is kind of interesting as a contrarian stack. Sub 5% ownership across the board, 4% coming into Tatis, 3% coming into Merrill and Machado. So far this season, Chad Patrick has allowed a 174 expected ISO to righties, 135 to lefties. Limited sample, about 500 pitches thrown to hitters from either side of the plate. But if you want to just bet on some talent in San Diego, I think that's fine. Not priorities, though. On the Milwaukee side, about 6% chance of being optimal for Jackson Chourio, for William Contreras, for Bryce Turang, 4% for Yelich, Durbin, 3% for Ortiz, Hoskins, pretty much in line with their ownership across the board, which is coming in at 5% or less. I will mention the splits for Randy Vasquez are insane. He is a competent, not good, but competent pitcher against right-handed hitters. 16.8% K percentage is low, but only a 334 expected WOBA, 157 expected ISO. Actual numbers are even better than that. Lefties, though, it's like he didn't know until he got to the major leagues that left-handed hitters existed. 10% strikeout percentage, 393 expected WOBA, 435 expected WOBA, 393 actual WOBA, 324 expected ISO, 222 actual ISO. The problem is that the Brewers don't have a lot of left-handed power. You have Christian Yelich, but he's an outfielder, so there's a million good plays there. You have Bryce Turang with some power, gives you stolen base upside, 4,900 at second base. But, Churrio is right-handed, Contreras is right-handed, Hoskins is right-handed. So that's kind of the issue. Collins, if he's in the lineup, Frelick, they're both left-handed as well, but you don't have like true power hitters from the left side throughout this lineup. If you did, then they would certainly look a lot better. But still, a solid enough spot against Vasquez. Not priorities, but a solid secondary stack. Dodgers are facing the Cardinals in St. Louis. And we talked about Sonny Gray a little bit a minute ago. Absolutely brutal matchup for him. But it's not like it's a good matchup for Tarik Skubal either. Also, I don't want it to sound like I am putting Sonny Gray in the same category as Skubal. Gray is very good. Skubal is otherworld. But you do get an $1,800 price difference with Gray coming in at $9,700. And he's still a very, very good pitcher. This season, 27.2% strikeout percentage. That is down a few points from last year. That is a little bit concerning. All of his metrics are down. Stuff plus down a point. Fastball velo down half a mile an hour. Pitching plus down 6 points. Location plus down 3 points. Still above average. But you kind of see across the board like that drop-off that you have also seen in strikeout percentage. So that is a concern with Gray as well. The bigger concern is simply that he is facing the Dodgers, and this is an incredibly good offense, incredibly good team. Against right-handed pitching this season, the Dodgers active roster is 16th in strikeout percentage. They are first in WRC+. So that's why you're not seeing much ownership coming into Gray. It's why you don't have a great projection on Gray for the salary. But when you consider range of outcomes, the point that I was making before and that somebody in chat had made, it's not that you would just bet on Sonny Gray straight up against Tarik Skubal. Obviously, you would be insane if you do that. It's simply that Skubal is getting like 3, 4, 5 times the ownership of Gray, and he's probably like 2-ish, maybe 2.5 times as likely to succeed. Actually, in the run I did before the show, it was even smaller than that. It was like 1.5x. So it's just kind of a range of outcomes thing, not being completely in line with the gap in ownership, but still like, if you have the money for Skubal, you're going to just want Skubal. He's obviously the better play. But if you don't have the money for Skubal, Gray probably is coming in a bit under-owned. He still certainly gives you a high ceiling, just given how good he is. Justin Robleski on the other side, no ownership coming into him at 7,500. Don't think that there should be. Offensively, Dodgers, if you get to them, great. They're still a really good offense. I don't care who they're facing. That being said, they are in St. Louis instead of in LA. We know LA is one of the best parks for home runs and for offense. One thing to keep in mind with St. Louis, though, is that it is, and I've mentioned this with Baltimore as well, weather does change pretty drastically throughout the year in St. Louis. Very similar weather to Baltimore. In the beginning of the year, it's cold and the ball does not carry. At the end of the year, it's cold. The ball does not carry. In the middle of the year, it's warm, humid, and the ball does carry. So that is something to keep in mind when you're just like looking at park factors overall, is that some stadiums do have bigger seasonal changes than others. And St. Louis is a park where the way the ball carries changes drastically. I lived in St. Louis for like 6 months, and just like Baltimore, for anybody that's familiar with the mid-Atlantic area, in the summer, you can't breathe. You walk outside, you immediately start sweating. It's humid as fuck. Ball carries. So that is something to keep in mind. You're not in like dead summer heat, obviously, yet in St. Louis, but it is a park that plays a lot better for offenses as the weather warms up. And getting away from that, it's the Dodgers. You have Shohei Ohtani, you have Will Smith, you have Tommy Edman, you have Mookie Betts, you have Teoscar, you have Freeman, you have Muncy, who apparently is no longer blind. It's a very high upside offense. You're going to get basically no ownership. The only guy getting ownership at all here is Shohei at like 8%. So it goes without saying, if you find a way to stack the Dodgers, great, it's the Dodgers. The problem, there's 2 of them, or 2.5. 1, you are getting that park downgrade. 2, you're facing Sonny Gray. And 3, probably the biggest one when you talk about a team as good as the Dodgers, where you don't care that much about the opponent. They're expensive on a slate where you have Tarek Skubal, where you have the Mets in Coors Field, where you have plenty of other offenses to get to. It's kind of the opposite of what I was saying with Kansas City and how good your teams look if you stack them. If you stack the Dodgers, great, but you still need the Dodgers to outscore like 21, 23 other teams. And then also you are kind of going to have like, Colton Gordon type pitching, or you're going to have Andrew Benintendi type one-offs, at least if you stack like the best parts of the Dodgers. So that's the issue with them. Probably a team that I would look to use more as like one-offs, two-mans, Shohei Ohtani plus another Dodger, stuff like that, more so than five-mans. For St. Louis, sub 5% ownership across the board, sub 5% chances of being optimal. Mason Wynn has the highest optimal rate at 4%. 4K shortstop, probably hitting near the top of the order. Wilson Contreras, Ivan Herrera, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan, who has been very good this year, all coming in at about 3%. Very limited sample for Robleski, even going back to last year, but a 217 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters, 253 to right-handed hitters. Righties do have the platoon advantage against him. So, again, nothing that looks like a priority, but some wins, some Contreras, not the end of the world, especially at weaker positions. Now we get to the fun one. About a 7-run total for the Mets in Coors Field. Antonio Senzatella is pitching. I mean, I don't know what to even say here. Like, Senzatella is awful. The park is great for hitting. The Mets have really good hitters. Lindor is day-to-day. He has a broken pinky toe, I think it was. He said he's going to play through it. I don't know if he'll end up needing a day or two off like Mookie Betts did before he comes back. We'll find out. But first off, we have Cody Senga going for the Mets. So you do actually have a pitcher to consider in this game. 9K price tag, about a 16 fantasy point projection, 21% projected ownership, 12% chance of being optimal. Senga's good. The Rockies suck. The only negative here is that the game is in Coors Field. If it were in Citi Field, then Senga would, look great. 23.5% K percentage so far this season. It is interesting that, obviously he didn't pitch last year. And then his stuff plus grade is below average this year, which isn't super surprising because he is splitter reliant. And that's a pitch that doesn't always grade out well. But also below average in location plus, in pitching plus. So he's good, but it is, just interesting that all of those metrics, or none of those metrics, really favor him. Does have a 23.5% strikeout percentage, though, and we know how bad the Rockies are, regardless of what stadium they're playing in. Senzatella goes without saying that you don't need him. He is $4,300 and showing up as optimal less than 1% of the time. So that's in part probably because I have a $49,000 salary floor on the lineups I built. But still, he's $4,300 and still not playable. Like, the only case I think you would make for Senzatella would be negative correlation against the Mets combined with he's $4,300. But like, even that ends up not really working because of the way scoring works in baseball and because of the slate size. Like, the Mets are going to be, 20% owned or something like that. So even if they get shut down, you're still contending with 80% of the field. And then it's not like, it's a sport like basketball where if you could, you play $4,300 Senzatella, and then you just have like Jokic plus Giannis plus LeBron or something, and you have the highest scorers. Like, you can plug in Soto, or in this case, not Soto, but you can plug in, Judge, Carroll, Ohtani, whatever. It's very likely they're going to get outscored by a couple of guys that are $1,000 or $2,000 less expensive than them, at least, even if they have a good game. And then obviously if they have a bad game, they're just getting outscored by like the entire field. So it just becomes not worth it to even really consider Senzatella, I don't think. Devin Scott said Senzatella has got to be the singular worst starting pitcher in the league. Amazed the Rockies haven't DFA'd him. Yeah, like when he first came up, he wasn't a good DFS pitcher, but he was at least in that category of like really annoying real life pitchers where he somehow just got weak contact, got ground balls, didn't get blown up that often. Now he is just bad. 269 expected ISO to righties this year, 225 to lefties. If you go back to last year, the sample size doesn't get much bigger, but it's 233 to lefties, 279 to righties. Like if you go back to 2019, 163 expected ISO to righties, 200 to lefties. That's at least like, it's not good, especially when you're not getting strikeouts, but there's at least like hope for him to have a good start. now, like, the only hope to him having a good start is, I don't know, like, the Mets fly out to the warning track 15 times and then hit 805-mile-an-hour line drives at infielders. Like, I don't know how a good start for Senzatella even happens. It's more so from a DFS standpoint. Do the Mets have a good game or a great game? Like, do they have a game where they don't hurt you, or do they have a game where they win you tournaments? Ownership on the Mets is probably coming in higher than it should from an optimal standpoint, but they are clearly in the best spot on the slate. 11% optimal rate for Soto at 6K, 10% for Nimmo at 4,700, 7% for Alonso at 5,800, Beatty at 4,400, Alvarez at 4K, McNeil at 4,600. And ownership on Beatty, Alvarez, McNeil is only coming in like 8 to 10%. So it's not like they're super popular across the board. It does help a lot that you have a 12-game slate because ownership can only really get so high. So they're going over owned, but they're still clearly some of the best plays on the slate. I would want to get to them, as much as I can, and then obviously pay attention to ownership, but it shouldn't be that hard to offset it on the slate. On the Rocky side against Senga, 4% optimal rate for Hunter Goodman is the highest. 3% ownership for Goodman is the highest, along with 3% Thairo Estrada. They're in Coors Field, so they have that working for them, but still a relatively low team total. And also, like, Coors Field is great, but you do also have Great American on this slate. You have Sutter Health or whatever it's called in Sacramento. So it's not like you're lacking you have Anaheim. It's not like you're lacking other good offensive environments either. Speaking of Anaheim, we have Seattle coming off of a series with the juggernaut Baltimore Orioles, where they got swept. Now they leave Seattle. They go into Anaheim. Good spot for them to get back to winning and scoring runs. Huge park upgrade, getting out of T-Mobile and going into Angel Stadium. Bryce Miller pitching for Seattle. Kyle Hendricks pitching for the Angels. I would make fun of Kyle Hendricks, but he's on a slate with Antonio Senzatella, so it just doesn't even feel like he's that bad. $5,500 price tag for Senzatella. $8,500 for Bryce Miller. 13.5 fantasy point projection for Miller. 8% chance of being optimal. 8% projected ownership. Very good strikeout matchup. Keep in mind, this lineup certainly is better now that you have Mike Trout back. That's just a very high quality hitter that is in a lineup that has power, albeit a lot of strikeouts. It's not a safe matchup. They have guys that can hit. It's just that they also strike out a lot. Now you throw Mike Trout in there. It does, deepen the lineup. Miller's a solid pitcher overall. So far this season, striking out 19.2% of hitters. That is down 5 points from last year. Pitching plus grade is down 15 points. Location plus grade is down 11 points. Stuff plus grade is down 4 points. So does have some major underlying red flags in addition to the drop-off in strikeout percentage that we have seen so far. Righties this season only striking out 18% of the time against him. 361 expected WOBA. That will be most of the Angels lineup. Lefties striking out 20% of the time. 338 expected WOBA. So the drop-off in strikeout stuff is concerning for Miller, especially since it's backed up by all of those other metrics. Last year, he struck out 24% of hitters, had above average location plus, well above average pitching plus, well above average stuff plus. None of that's the case anymore. So that combined with the park downgrade is cause for concern. The counter argument, though, the reason he is, still getting 8% ownership and is still showing up as optimal 8% of the time is it's still a high strikeout team. He is somebody that has at least shown in the past the ability to strike out major league hitters. Maybe he gets it back today. Maybe he figures it out. But there are legitimate red flags on Bryce Miller this season. Kyle Hendricks on the other side, 5,500, 3% ownership, 7% chance of being optimal. We're at least in like that normal range with Kyle Hendricks, where the optimal rate is telling you like, hey, a starting pitcher should never be $5,500. Whereas Senzatella, it's saying like, hey, this guy should not be pitching in the major leagues. But beyond that, still don't think you want to be getting to too much Kyle Hendricks here. But from a pure point per dollar basis, he's fine. If for some reason you need it, maybe you're going with that full Dodger stack and you want some of the Mets or something too, and you need Kyle Hendricks. Fine, but clearly not somebody that you're looking to get to. The Mariners get a nice park upgrade here. The pricing on them in general looks good. You have a couple of expensive bats and guys that obviously have earned it. Cal Raleigh in particular, $5,600, best hitting catcher in baseball, one of the best overall hitters in baseball. He is a catcher that is in the top 5 in WRC plus this season. He's hit like 23 home runs or something. He is unbelievably good, and he gets a nice matchup against Kyle Hendricks. Obviously, if you can get there, great. 163 expected ISO allowed to left-handed hitters so far this season for Hendricks. 177 going back to last year. Jorge Polanco, 3,800. We saw the massive start to the season for him. I think he hit like 9 home runs in April or something. He has cooled off quite a bit, and he was bad last year too. So it's not like we can be super confident that Jorge Polanco is a great hitter or anything, but the salary has corrected. It's down to 3,800, and also he has third base and shortstop eligibility, so that's useful too. So 11% chance of being optimal there at 7% ownership, 9% ownership, 10% chance of being optimal for $5,000 Julio Rodriguez. And then pretty much 5 to 6% ownership and 5 to 6% chances of being optimal for the rest of this team. Cole Young, JP Crawford, Randy Arozarena, Rowdy Tellez, Leody Taveras. They all look solid. It's a good spot for Seattle. Take advantage of that park upgrade. You'll be able to take advantage of it probably normally you can take advantage of it a little bit more when they immediately get out of Seattle because their prices are usually lower. But Cal Raleigh has just been hitting so well that his salary is just now permanently stuck in the mid 5K range. And then Julio is still relatively expensive as well. But still, as a team, as a stack, outside of Raleigh and Julio, next most expensive guy on the team is Arozarena at $4,400. So it's a cheap stack. There's plenty of power upside here. You get some stolen base upside with Crawford and Rodriguez. So I think Seattle looks very good. On the other side, Angels. I am interested in them just because of the park and the fact that Bryce Miller has been trash this year. Not trash in terms of, allowing tons of power. Allows some. Like I was saying before, 159 expected ISO to righties, only 105 to lefties, but he'll be facing righties here. But just not missing bats. And this Angels team is a team that strikes out a lot, but has power. And they are in a good park for hitting home runs. So that can obviously go one of two ways. Like you can make the case for Bryce Miller where you have a pitcher that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts, but now he's facing a team that loves to swing and miss. Maybe the strikeouts come back. You can make the other side of that case, though, where you have a team that swings and misses a lot, but when they hit it, they do damage, and they're facing a pitcher that hasn't figured out how to get swings and misses this year. So maybe they just do a lot of damage. I'm not saying that they're a priority, but I think that like Zach Neto is getting the most ownership on the slate at 3%. Mike Trout's or on the team rather at 3%. Mike Trout 3%. Sean Well 3%. Everybody else is like 2% or less. That's a lot of home run upside at 2% ownership, 3% ownership. If you do something like Zach Neto plus Trout plus Ward plus Soler plus O'Hoppe or something, and they're not expensive either. 4,200 to O'Hoppe, 3,500 to Soler, who's day to day, 3,400 to Shanwell, 4,300 to Ward. The only expensive guys here are Neto at 5,300 and Trout at 5,200. So I do like the upside you get with the Angels. But, obviously it's a very boom or bust team. But I think they're going under-owned. 8% optimal rate for Neto, 6% apiece for Trout, for Shanwell, for Ward, 5% for Rengifo, 5% for Soler and O'Hoppe, 3% for Adele. Just a team to consider as a contrarian, low-owned team that does certainly have upside at reasonable pricing. Now we get to another great park for offense in Sacramento. Orioles leave T-Mobile Park, where they just swept the Mariners on a 6-game win streak. They've won like 9 of 11. They're actually playing like a competent baseball team again. Colton Cowser's back. They have reinforcements coming probably next week with Westberg, Sanchez, and somebody else. Laureano, all rehabbing right now. But now they get a huge park upgrade going into Sacramento, and you have a night game, which generally means the wind's blowing out. Good park for offense, like a 5.5 to 6 implied run total, it looks like, for the O's. Hopefully they can keep the winning streak going for my sanity. JP Sears pitching for the A's, Dean Kramer for the Orioles. Now, one huge negative here is that JP Sears is left-handed, which is a problem for the Orioles, especially when half their team is on the injured list. They don't have O'Neill. They don't have Sanchez. They don't have Laureano. So that is problematic. Their active roster, 17th in WRC plus against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. They have the 7th highest strikeout percentage, and they just don't really have the ability to platoon all that much right now. And then also the problem is when you just look at their best hitters, Jackson Holliday is left-handed. Gunnar Henderson is left-handed. Ryan O'Hearn is left-handed. Cowser is left-handed. Like the righties in this lineup tonight are probably Adley Rutschman switch hitting, who he did make an adjustment to his swing. He got rid of his toe tap within the last couple of days and suddenly started hitting home runs. But Adley Rutschman will be hitting from the right side. You have Kobe Mayo, who very legitimate power hitting prospect, but I still don't think has hit a major league home run yet. Ramon Urias is fine. Emmanuel Rivera is fine. Dylan Carlson will be hitting from the right side as a switch hitter as well. That is not a murderer's row of right-handed power. So that is what's working against the Orioles. That being said, still a very good park. Still, probably getting predominantly right-handed arms out of the bullpen because that's, what teams have. The A's do have 3 left-handed relievers. Sean Newcomb threw 45 pitches yesterday. He's not pitching today. But Hogan Harris did not pitch yesterday. TJ McFarland, former Oriole, revenge game narrative, did not pitch yesterday. Just came back from the injured list. So they do have a couple of lefties they can use to match up with those Orioles lefties throughout the game as well. So that is the negative for Baltimore. They are getting a lot of ownership, and I do think they're going – actually, I'll start with the pitching here just to finish that up. JP Sears is not getting into lineups that I built. Where did he go? Oh, it's because never mind. I just have it filtered by Orioles. JP Sears is getting into lineups I built. So I do think Sears, I think Sears is actually interesting a little bit at 6,300. He's getting 4% ownership, actually showed up with a 10% chance of being optimal. And again, keep in mind, optimal percentage is always going to be a little bit overstated for the cheapest pitchers other than Senzatella, and understated for the most expensive guys like Tubal. But everything I was just saying, it does help JP Sears. That doesn't mean it's a safe spot or anything like that. But he does have a 21% strikeout percentage, only a 152 expected ISO allowed to lefties this season. If you go back to last year, it's a 21.5% K percentage, 137 expected ISO. It's righties that have really done damage. 221 expected ISO last year, 229 this year, lower strikeout percentage. And it's a pretty balanced lineup overall, but the talent definitely skews left-handed in the O's lineup. So that would be the case for a cheap JP Sears if you want to go that route. Dean Kramer on the other side, 6% ownership at 6,800. Also a 10% chance of being optimal. The A's have been playing like shit lately. I think somebody's mentioned they're like 1-20, which sounds right. But they do have, talented hitters in this lineup. Butler, Soderstrom, Rooker, Langoliers from a power standpoint. Langoliers, I think, left yesterday's game early, so may or may not be in the lineup today. Jacob Wilson does not strike out, so that's a negative for Kramer. Kramer hasn't been very good overall this season. Has shown some signs of life recently, though. But overall, strikeout percentage is down about 5 points to 17.5. Everything else is pretty much in line or even better than it was last year, though. So I am kind of bullish on Kramer going forward. I say that, with cautious optimism as an Orioles fan. I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but he's not one of these guys where the strikeout percentage has dropped off significantly, and so has everything else. His stuff plus grade is actually 1.5 higher than last year. Location plus is 1.5 higher. Pitching plus is 1 higher. Fastball velo is the same. So you don't look at him and just go like, oh, wow, yeah, I see why he's not getting strikeouts. So cautiously optimistic that he can, continue to kind of pitch better, but still a very scary spot in Sacramento. He is really cheap, though, if you need a cheap arm. For the bats, I was starting to touch on it before. I think the Orioles are good. They're in a good ballpark. They have talented hitters, even though facing a lefty is a legitimate problem for this team. Adley Rutschman getting 15% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal. 3,900 is an absurd price tag for Adley Rutschman. I know his overall numbers this year suck. The expected numbers have been much better. He's been hitting the ball well lately. 3,900 is crazy for Adley Rutschman in a good park. But also the ownership is there. Gunnar Henderson, 16% ownership at 4,700. That's a cheaper price tag than usual for Gunnar. Again, he has underperformed so far this season by his standards. Did start the year off with the oblique injury. It is lefty-lefty. Jackson Holliday, 11% ownership at 4K, 5% chance of being optimal. Again, I think the lefty-lefty matchup is it's more concerning to me than it seems like it will be for the field. And I can make either argument. I can make the case. The ownership kind of drives the argument for me. If the Orioles were not getting ownership, I would want to say, okay, I don't care. It's still a mediocre lefty. It's still a great park for offense. It's a Baltimore offense that is affordable, and I'm going to just take chances on them. But with the ownership projected where it is, I do kind of just keep landing, even in my head and also in, what I ran on, okay, yeah, it's a good park. It's a mediocre pitcher, all of that. But you can't ignore that the talent in this lineup, for the most part, can't hit left-handed pitching because they're left-handed and they suck in that platoon. And then they are missing most of their good right-handed hitters to injury. So you actually end up with, a team that is not good for good reason against left-handed pitching. And then 2, a team with pinch hit risk. You have Heston Kjerstad most likely starting the game on the bench. It looks like he's in the projected lineup that we had from our data provider, but probably starting the game on the bench. Or maybe Colton Cowser starts on the bench, or maybe both of them start on the bench, and then they just both come in the pinch hit. Like maybe Jordan Adams starts this game instead of Cowser, but then Cowser comes in as soon as a right-handed reliever comes in. So you have pinch hit risk on Rivera. You have pinch hit risk on potentially Kobe Mayo, but more so on Rivera. And then like if they were to start like Jordan Adams or something, you have pinch hit risk there. So there's some pinch hit risk. And then it's just a bunch of guys that can't hit lefties. So basically it's just a long way of saying, like, I think it's a very, the range of outcomes here is very, very wide. The Orioles ceiling is very, very high, but them facing a lefty is a problem. Matt said, will Westberg be back tonight? I don't think so. I know he hasn't been activated yet. I don't think he's coming back quite yet. I think he's back soon. But I also haven't, looked for super current updates. Maybe that changes. But I don't think he's quite back yet. I think he's still rehabbing. He'll play another rehab game on Thursday is the most recent thing on DraftKings. Day-to-day basis. So I guess he could be back today. Keep an eye out for it. If Westberg is back, he's 3,800. So a couple things happen. One, he's 3,800 and he'll look very good. But also it does make the Orioles look that much more appealing because it gives them another right-handed bat. It makes it harder to, bring lefties in to match up with them later on in the game. That's another, issue is like when you think about, let's say you're the A's manager, right? You get to like the 6th inning or the 7th inning, and the top of the lineup is Holiday, Henderson, Rutschman, O'Hearn. You can just bring a lefty in there, take your chances with Rutschman. You're in a very good spot against Holiday, Henderson, O'Hearn. If that is Holiday, Rutschman, Henderson, Westberg, O'Hearn, it becomes a lot less favorable because that lefty now has to face, if you bring him in for Holiday, then he has to face Rutschman, guaranteed. If you bring him in for Gunnar, he has to face Westberg, guaranteed. So like Westberg impacts that as well, like how easy it is to match up, and also just how good the stack looks overall. So do keep an eye on Westberg. I would like them more if he's back. Anyway, Kobe Mayo is 2,100. Like I think he's a good play, but he's getting 10-11% ownership. Urias at 3K. So basically taking a step back, the Orioles are in a very good spot overall. Good hitting park, mediocre pitcher that gives up power to righties. It's a very volatile spot because most of the best hitters on the Orioles are left-handed, which is not as much of a problem for Sears. The A's have left-handed relievers, and the Orioles lefties don't hit left-handed pitching well. On the A's side, not as much ownership, and I do think they're interesting because it's the same park, obviously. It's the same hitting conditions. Dean Kramer is okay, but he's not a lights-out pitcher or anything like that. So far this season, I mentioned the strikeout percentage being down. Only a 141 expected ISO to righties, but 226 to lefties. Tyler Soderstrom, Lawrence Butler stand out as far as left-handed bats with power. 6% ownership coming into Soderstrom, 8% to Butler. Optimal percentages are in that range. 8% to Rooker, 5% chance of being optimal. I think he looks fine. Then you do drop off in power, especially if Langoliers isn't available today. But don't sleep on the A's here, especially Soderstrom, especially Butler. I really like the 4K price tag on Soderstrom and 4,300 on Butler. Also 4,400 for Rooker is about as cheap as you're going to get. It is crazy from a upside standpoint and like a DFS standpoint. Jacob Wilson, he's good at what he does. He's been very impressive as a rookie. He doesn't strike out. He puts the ball in play, et cetera, et cetera. Fantasy points come from stolen bases and home runs. Jacob Wilson should not be more expensive than Tyler Soderstrom, Lawrence Butler, and Brent Rooker. Should not happen. But take advantage of the cheap price tags that you're getting on Soderstrom, Butler, and Rooker. And then wrapping this one up, going back to a very good pitcher's park in San Francisco with the Braves taking on the Giants. Spencer Schwellenbach for Atlanta. Hayden Birdsong, 8,600 for the Giants. 18.8 fantasy point projection for Schwellenbach is the second highest on the slate. Nice park upgrade, solid matchup overall. The Giants' active roster against right-handed pitching so far this season ranks. Where the hell are they? 16th in WRC plus. They rank 10th in strikeout percentage. So solid matchup there for Schwellenbach. The Giants lineup probably pretty balanced. Projected lineup that I'm looking at has 4 righties in the top 5, and then 5 righties overall. But the 4 in the top 5 is nice. Schwellenbach's strikeout numbers are much better against righties than against lefties. 19.3% strikeout percentage, 210 expected ISO to lefties this year, 29.3% strikeout percentage, so 10 points higher with a sub 100 expected ISO to righties. He's fine in this park, even against lefties, especially when, if the Giants find some other lefties to run out there, it's still not like they're good lefties. But the fact that most of the Giants' best hitters are right-handed is very good for Schwellenbach as well. 16% projected ownership at $10,000, 20% chance of being optimal. I like Schwellenbach quite a bit here. Birdsong getting 3% ownership, 5% chance of being optimal. Don't love the price tag on him in this matchup. It is a good park. He does have good stuff. 102 stuff plus grade through his 14 innings pitched this year. 25% strikeout percentage through his 14 innings as a starter. Above average pitching plus grade. Like, Birdsong is solid. If he lands in your lineup as like a mid-range, low-owned guy, fine. But not somebody that I would expect to have much of just because that price tag is pretty expensive. Offensively, Braves look like another, middle-of-the-road contrarian tournament team to me. The park limits home run upside, but it's still a team that has a lot of power. And most importantly, they're affordable. Acuna is coming in at $5,900. Olsen at $5K. But other than that, $4,700 remains a pretty good price tag for Austin Riley. $3,800 for Albies is nice. $4,100 for Baldwin is fine. $4K for Ozuna is solid. So obviously you wish it weren't in this park, but they're getting basically 2 to 3% ownership across the board, with the exception of 5% coming into Acuna. Optimal rates are more in that 5% range, with the exception of about 8% for Acuna. On the Giant side, not much interest there. No ownership coming in. No notable optimal percentages coming in. If you look for bats against Schwellenbach, like I said, it is left-handed bats. That leaves you with basically Jung-Ho Lee. Not an offense that I'm really looking to get to. So I'm going to recap everything now. JT said, congrats on your takedown a few days ago. Thanks. Yeah, it was last Friday, so hopefully you can just run it back today. It was nice to win one of the bigger flagship tournaments. Those are the $5 and the $8, very difficult to win. So it's nice to take that down. Shout out Kyle Rowley for his 2 home runs. Top pitching plays in terms of optimal percentages right now. Tarek Skubal, Spencer Schwellenbach, and then a drop off to Sonny Gray, Ben Brown, Will Warren. For value, Colton Gordon looking like the best sub 7K guy in our projections, at least right now. Top catchers: Salvador Perez, Cal Raleigh, Yainer Diaz, Adley Rutschman. Top first baseman: Vinny Pasquantino, Christian Walker, Pete Alonso. Top second baseman: Ketel Marte, Jonathan India. And then just a bunch of random shit: Cole Young, Mauricio Dubon, Bryce Turang, Jackson Holiday. Third base: Michael Garcia, Isaac Paredes, Eugenio Suarez, Rafael Devers. A bunch of guys lumped together after that. Shortstop: you can throw Brett Beatty in there as well. Just obviously think he's a good play. Shortstop: Bobby Witt Jr., Jeremy Pena, Zach Neto. Pay attention to Francisco Lindor's status. Obviously, he's up there if he ends up being in the lineup. Outfield: the guys you would expect: Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo, Julio Rodriguez, Corbin Carroll, Ronald Acuna, Jarren Duran, Judge up here somewhere in that range. So pretty much what you'd expect there. Top overall stacks: KC, Houston, Seattle, Arizona, Mets. 5-man stacks: KC, Houston, Arizona, Seattle, Boston. So it looks like more like small stacks for the Mets right now. Certainly could change between now and lock. Wouldn't be mad if it does, but I think that is kind of interesting from a roster construction standpoint. So that's all I have for you on this one. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. All that stuff helps out quite a bit. You can use our projections using the link in the description below. Don't forget to use promo code UTAMLB to get 10% off. Thank you for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Enjoy your weekend. See you back here next week.